I'd like to begin in the year 2005 because I think that's within our recollection. And if you remember correctly, in April of 2005, John Paul II passed away in April. And then a mere 2 weeks later, there was a conclave, there was the voting for a successor, and lo and behold, a man by the name of Cardinal Ratzinger was elected, and he became Benedict the 16th. The reason I mention that is because that is kind of the format, the context that we have experienced for the past 600 years when we talk about a change in the papacy, in that the Pope, who is the Pope, dies. There is a time of mourning. There is then the gathering of the cardinals, and then we have the cardinals going into conclave, and out of the conclave comes a successor to the person who had recently died. That is the context. Usually death brings about the vacancy. What we have experienced since the 11th of February, however, is a little bit different, but it is also recognized in the law of the Church, both from the early 1900s in the Code of Canon Law and repeated in 1983 in the new Code of Canon Law. And in those it says that either by death or by resignation, the see becomes vacant. Only those two realities bring about a situation of electing someone to become Pope. A word about the resignation. It says, it doesn't say much, it doesn't have to, they only want to make 3 points. The resignation has to be done freely, can't be under coercion or a threat. It's something that the Pope himself freely chooses. Secondly, it has to be properly manifested. It's not something that you say, to yourself and then tell the world, well, I'm no longer there. Benedict, he did it with the cardinals all present. He manifested his intention. Thirdly, very importantly, nobody accepts the resignation. The fact that he gives a resignation is all it takes. When he did it, he said, effective Thursday, the 28th of February at 8 p.m. He was very explicit. But at that point, he had voiced his commitment to resigning. He did it freely in a public manifestation, and therefore while he still held the office, he backed off from many of his duties at that point. That is very important because filling the see can only be done when the see is vacant, and it's only vacant those 2 ways. Now, I'm underscoring that because in the 13 and 1400s, there were years when we had more than one person saying that they were Pope. And in fact, at one point, we had 3 people. And it took a council to sort it out who was the legitimate successor of Peter. So it's very, very concise and to the point. Over the years, there have been many changes to the rules and regulations when this happens. In fact, in the 20th century, all but 2 of the popes changed how this was done. Benedict XV, the time of World War I, he did not change the rules at all. John Paul I, in 1978, was only a pope for 30 days. He didn't get to it. Everyone else, Pius X, changed the rules. Pius XI changed the rules. Pius XII changed the rules. John the 23rd changed the rules. Paul VI changed the rules. John Paul II, he changed the rules. And Benedict, as he was leaving, he changed the rules. I say that lest we think that somehow this has been a static thing, a static way of acting. Each one has added something, mostly because they're trying to preserve certain values, and they have experienced some difficulty with that. For example, one thing that each one of them is trying to do is make sure that what the cardinals are doing is electing a successor. They're not there as a group to be primarily running the church. They're there to elect a pope. And that's why there's all these time things and everything else, so that they don't get accustomed to it. We make sure that there's, a certain, focus that they retain. Having said that, some of the work has to go on. I'll get to that in a minute, so that while they're not there to run the church, some things inevitably have to be done. And they have a way of addressing that. Even at this moment, there are people who have retained their position because of the sensitivity of what they're doing. And so the popes in the past have changed the setting to, first of all, preserve that the cardinals are only there to do the election. Secondly, that some of the work goes on, but it's minimal and only if it's necessary. And thirdly, nothing new is to be done. Nothing new. And in those various changes, different expressions have been used, but many of them come out and say, if there's an attempt to do something new, the new pope is to nullify it when he comes in. Nullify it because it was illegitimate. So that the church is very, very sensitive that we're paying attention to having a successor of Peter. We're not open to the idea of other people getting involved. Other people did get involved, however, in the past, and in 1904, the Pope came out with a rule that I don't know if this is going to be a complete surprise, but certain European monarchs, the King of France at times, the King of Spain, the Holy Roman Emperor, these people actually had a veto over someone that was presented to be a pope. In 1904, that was strictly forbidden. No longer was that to be done. If anyone tried to do it, they received an automatic excommunication from the church. So that what the popes were doing over those centuries was in response to experiences that were not all they should have been. And they were responding to try to tighten it up, to make sure that we don't have pressure. Even today, for example, where they're holding these meetings and where most of the cardinals are actually living, there, you have to go outdoors and walk there, or for the ones who have difficulty walking, they have little, trolley type things. They're not allowed to talk to the people. People aren't allowed to talk to them. Why? Because there's not to be any pressure. There's not to be any, politicking. And so they try to keep the area as much as possible clear because of the integrity of what is happening. The other interesting thing, and then I'll get on because, there's a lot to say today. In the year 1921, there was a big change, and that had to do with the number of days between the death of the Pope and when you actually begin the conclave. And it really came out of the United States and Canada, because when they got the word that the Pope was dead, of course, they would try to get a boat, it was before airplanes, try to get a boat, and they arrived late. The conclave was over. And the Cardinal Archbishop of Boston went twice and never made it to do the voting. And so at that point, it then went from the time of the death of the Pope, and you weren't allowed to begin anything for 15 days to give people a chance to come. So there were, some of the changes were just because the church was becoming more and more universal, that there were cardinals in other places than Europe, that they had to provide the time for them to travel. Things are a lot different today with airplanes. As was reported today already, now there are only 2 cardinals shot, and they are en route, and then they will be there. And once they're there, then it's hard to say what will happen, but at least they have committed themselves that they will only make decisions about when the conclave begins when everyone who's a voter is present. And so as they began on Monday, I think they were shot 8, and then it went to 6, and then to 4, and now it's 2 who are still coming. As soon as they come, the speculation is that they may well begin on either Sunday or Monday.